All right, y'all. We're 4 days away, and it's time to go behind enemy lines. To know your enemy, you got to talk to your enemy a little bit. So, tonight, we're going to do just that right after this little break. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And tonight, as I stated, we are behind enemy lines. I got my guy, Nick, from the Chicago Bears side of things. Nick, thank you so much for joining me tonight. This has been in the works for many, many months. I appreciate you following through on your end of the bargain. Thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, man. I haven't done something like this before. I've hosted, bringing enemies behind our lines. I've never been on the other side, entering your arena. So this is all new to me, but excited to come on and talk about, week one. Finally, it's here.
Well, listen, man, we'll treat you very nice. We're not going to be crazy over here. I will say this, we've had some Bears fans though on the flip side jumping into some of our chats, talking all sorts of crazy mess. So, I think in talking to you, you might be a little bit more level-headed, mild-mannered, but I still think that you love your team, and some of that's going to show through, and we'll have a lot of fun tonight for sure. So, with that being said, before we even get into this game and all the things that we need to know about it, I just want to ask you, I want to figure out where you're at. Let's get a pulse check. What is the Bears record this year in your eyes?
Man, coming out with the big question out of the gate. Yeah, I like it. Full confidence record out that I'm going with is 10-7. I think that a lot of people are sleeping on this Bears team. And, a good friend of mine, Eric Kramer, former Chicago Bears quarterback, he owns a single season passing record. He's the only guy to get close to 4,000 yards in the modern era. And I interviewed him last night and, talking with him. Again, our channel is all about being optimistic. And talking to him, getting an NFL player's perspective, especially a former Chicago Bears perspective, 10-7 is not out of the picture for this team. Third easiest schedule in the NFL. You have Justin Fields with former Green Bay Packers quarterback Luke Getsy leading the way. You have Matt from the offensive coordinator standpoint. You have Matt Eberflus coming in and bringing an entirely new perspective of treating football players like football players, not guys like being, hey, we're going to be soft. The Bears are coming out and they're going to come out strong this year. I'm going 10-7.
I like it. The chat disagrees a little bit. They think that you meant
I can see that already.
Nah, man. I like it. You know what? Here's the thing, Nick. I don't know if the Bears are this team, but there is a team every year that surprises you, right? And you can probably tell me a little bit more than what I would know, but usually it's a team that was really close in a lot of games the year prior and just was unable for one reason or another to pull it out. And then the next year they make that leap. So were the Bears in a lot of close games last year, especially down the stretch? Was that a part of maybe you're thinking into this or?
Yeah, no. So at the beginning of the season, the Bears came out and their big first win was against the Cincinnati Bengals at Soldier Field, where the Bengals obviously went to the Super Bowl, and a lot of people were like, okay, I definitely understand that this team is good, and at the beginning of the season, that gets you excited. Bears walk into Soldier Field, play Green Bay, where Aaron Rodgers told us that he owned us, which he has over the last decade. As a Bears fan, sure. I fully admit that Aaron Rodgers has definitely owned the Chicago Bears. There is no doubt about that. But there was a lot of hype entering that game. And until the second half, it was a good game. It was a fun, active game, and the Bears showed flashes. But when you have an offensive-minded, I'm going to put quotations around it, head coach that is so egotistical and so obsessed with himself that he let himself get into the game where there was a flow, things were happening. The Bears always found themselves in that situation because Matt Nagy loved to be scripted. The first half always went way better than the second half because the second half, he'd run out of time because he didn't have enough practice time to do the whole entire second half. and he hoped for the best. And the Bears always found themselves in tough situations. And I can't remember the exact number. I believe it's 5 or 6 games that the Bears were down by less than a touchdown entering the fourth quarter. And they unfortunately, I don't remember the exact number, so don't quote me on that. It's within that range. But you get half those losses back. The Bears are almost a 500 team. And they're on their way in this weird rebuild that they're in because they keep putting duct tape over big cracks. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that movie, like The World Ends or anything. And, they put a piece of duct tape on it and they're like, oh, this works. That's what Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy were doing the last couple of years. It was horrible.
Yeah. And wasn't there a game or two that, that Nagy was out and they looked way better without Nagy?
Yes. It was against you guys. Was that the game
that he missed?
Yes. So we had our special teams. We had our special teams coordinator take over, and the Bears lost 33-22.
Yeah.
But it was a fun game. There was a lot. The Bears were dealing with COVID, obviously, because that's why Matt Nagy was out. But it was a fun game to be a part of. It was, and the players actually looked like they respected their coaches when they were walking over to the sideline. When Matt Nagy was over there, Bears players just walked right past him, and he's clapping. Hey guys, you guys got it. And everyone's like, all right, man, like no one likes you. He was the most hated man in the locker room.
I love it, man. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. I do remember now that was against us. And that was, I thought that was Fields' best game all last year was against the 49ers, especially with the circumstances. And I know that he has an axe to grind against San Francisco for passing on him, as he does, I'm sure, about every team that passed on him. But I thought that was his best game. I thought he looked super dynamic. And I felt like the team was just free flowing. Right. And so addition by subtraction, just losing Nagy, and then Eberflus is coming from a very good team, just a good coaching tree. So I think that the Bears, I'm obviously not as optimistic as you are, right? Like I don't see that from them. That being said, I do think that the Bears in a year or two can be very, very serious contenders. So what's going on with Roquan real quick? I didn't have that on the list, but what's up with him? Is he in? Is he good to go? Do you see that lingering past this season? Like, what are your thoughts with that?
So the situation unfolded that, Roquan Smith obviously wanted big money. He wants to be the first linebacker to make $20+ million. And in my opinion, as a Bears fan, and I'm sure he doesn't get the respect that he deserves around the league. 163 tackles last year. He's been snubbed of the Pro Bowl the last 2 years. He's been an AP second team player, which is great. There's no doubt about that. He's a very talented linebacker. But at the same time, he doesn't have an agent, and he wanted big money now. He didn't want to go through another year of the rebuild and having to, he's still going to make decent money. He's on the last year of his rookie contract, which he negotiated himself with Ryan Pace. So the only person that can kick himself more for not having more money this year is himself. They took full advantage of a guy coming out of college without an agent and wanted to be his own agent, which he gets all the money and he doesn't have to give out any commission checks to anyone.
For sure.
But at the same time, Roquan Smith didn't deserve it yet. And Ryan Poles, I respect the hell out of him for this, is that he walked into, the Bears organization, said, you are not going to, jerk me around like players did to Ryan Pace. Ryan Pace just kind of listened to the media too much. Ryan Poles doesn't care about fan feelings. He doesn't care about media feelings. He wants the Bears to be a successful team. And the Bears don't have the cap this year to go out and pay Roquan Smith $20+ million. If he can do what he's done the last 2 years, this year in a row, he's definitely worth it. But also the Bears are going to have $100+ million in cap, at a projected cap entering next season. They can pay Roquan Smith. And also it's not like he's not getting paid this year. Like he's making money. He's making more money than probably most of the people here. I don't know if there's NFL players watching,
right.
But dude's going to be making millions this year.
Yeah.
So Ryan Poles was like, hey, and he's admitted, we want to make it happen. We want to re-sign you. We want you to be a part of this organization for a long time, but we don't have the money right now. We're trying to piece together a team. We're trying to rebuild it. So Roquan Smith was doing a hold-in. He was going to practice, but he wasn't doing the preseason. And the Bears were classy enough to put him on the physically unable to perform list, the PUP list, and then not find him after they took it off. So the Bears were nice enough not to do that. I mean, I think they did the math. He would have gotten like 140,000 in fines. I read somewhere on Twitter if the Bears didn't do that. But he's in. Bears are playing him. He's the starting middle linebacker on the depth chart. That was a long answer to your question, but he is fully in. And he even said he's betting on himself at this point. Because if he has a huge year, that's just good for him in order to get more money. But also in my head, I'm hoping that he kind of wakes up and says he needs an agent at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a staple of the Bears organization is that middle linebacker. That's it. You know what I mean? When you think of the Bears, you think of great linebacker, you think of great defense, but great linebackers, you think of Walter Payton. So I think Roquan will probably be there. And hearing that they have
Walter Payton's a running back.
No. I understand that. I said you think of linebackers and Walter Payton. Yeah. Sorry, my bad. Might have been talking a little fast. No. You think of great linebackers and Walter Payton. That's what I think of when I think of the Bears. So to lose a guy like Roquan Smith would be massive for that franchise, especially early on. I think hearing that there's that much money, I think that's great to hear. I personally would love to see him continue in a Bears uniform. I just think it's fitting for a great linebacker to play in that uniform. So, Ryan, we're not going to answer this question because it is on the list. So you're jumping the gun, but you're in my brain. He says, Nick, it's draft day 2021. 2021, you're the GM. You picking Fields or Lance. We're going to get to that. I promise you. It is on the list, Ryan. You are definitely in my brain for sure. Okay. Who is one player that we should get to know as 49er fans that maybe we haven't heard of, maybe some of us have heard of, but just a guy that you as Bears fans are looking at going, oh yeah, this kid's talented. Not a lot of people know him yet, but they're going to know him this year. And 49er fans might know him really well after week one. Who's that one player for you?
Man, and it's a good question because Ryan Poles, overrode the roster. Only 27 guys on the roster. So a little more than half are from last year's roster. He's done a complete overload. He had 11 picks this year. And one player that I think that the entire league needs to look out for is Jaquan Brisker. This guy from Penn State was an absolute steal. And a lot of people also don't realize this, but he was chosen with the Khalil Mack second round we got from the LA Chargers. So Ryan Poles went out and got someone that can make an immediate impact like Khalil Mack did while we had him on Chicago. And so far, just from training camp, just from film, he looks fantastic. Hard-hitting guy. He kind of reminds me, and what's ironic is that he's like Amos, and Amos went to Penn State as well. We lost Amos to free agency a couple of years ago, which I thought was a huge mistake. But Brisker is the guy that he has the most to prove, but I think that he has every piece of talent in order to make the league go, wow, how did this guy fall to pick 48?
Yeah, Brisker is uber talented. A lot of us wanted a safety in San Francisco. The way the draft fell, Nick Cross is a guy that I look at and say, man, he's the one that got away because they went with another running back in round 3 for whatever reason here in San Francisco. But Brisker was he was the pipe dream guy for San Francisco. It's like, oh gosh, probably not going to happen. But if he falls, Brisker is a guy, and he's looked every bit that player. I know it's early, it's preseason, but everything that I've read as far as training camp goes and preseason he is all over the place. So I think you guys got yourself a dog there. And I think it's a name that probably not a lot of people know unless you really geek out on draft stuff. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a name that everybody's going to know at the end of this year for sure. I love that.
I sure hope so. I mean, I'm excited about it. And also I love that he already went to the single number jersey that, how everyone's allowed to wear whatever number they want now. He just looks tough out there wearing number 9. I'm stoked about it.
So much better. I love it. I absolutely love it. All right. So I actually like the way that Ryan with his super chat eloquently put it. I said, did the 49ers mess up in taking Lance over Fields? But let's say you're the GM. We'll pose it like Ryan did. You're the GM, your team. You have Lance, you have Fields. Who are you taking and why?
Justin Fields, hands down.
Okay.
So, fun fact about me is I went to Illinois State University, and North Dakota State is within the same conference. So I got to deal with them every year, and being, a big Redbirds fan, I got to see Trey Lance. And what the thing is about North Dakota State is, I just have to put it out there, is that they're amazing for Division I AA because they get so much good talent. But if you were to put them in the Big Ten, the SEC, they would get dominated. And, Trey Lance, he looked fantastic in college because you're technically going out against, Division I talent, but it's AA. And I thought, there's no doubt that he's talented, by the way. I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback,
For sure.
but you have Justin Fields going out there taking down Clemson. You have Justin Fields going out there, with a shooting match with LSU. You have Justin Fields going out there in college, proving against these huge teams with top 5 talent across the board in every single team that they go against. And he's performing, winning huge games. I mean, I'm going with Justin Fields just the mechanics as well. I just love everything about him. And my big thing is, I'm not sure if you've watched, Just Another Year Chicago, but I always get excited whenever I yell, he's got that 4.4440 dash speed. He's a dual threat. And, that's why I'm going with Justin Fields. Nothing against Lance. I think he has a lot of potential to be a great quarterback. I think that, especially being on the 49ers, he's in an offense that's friendly to him to help him develop the best way he can. But if back in 2021, to answer the question, I'm going with Justin Fields, though.
No, that's totally fair. I think we should go with our quarterback, right? It's funny though, Nick, because in the 49er community, it was mainly like Justin Fields love, right? And I'm sure you've heard these rumors. It seems like they're impossible to get away from. But you hear these rumors of, well, the 49ers fan base pushed Kyle Shanahan away from Mac Jones, who he really wanted. And that's why they ended up with Lance. Well, actually, the 49ers fan base was huge into Fields. I would say it was 80% Fields. Then there were a few stragglers that were for Mac, and then the rest of us were Trey Lance. I was on the Trey Lance side. I really liked Fields a lot. I had him as my number 3 quarterback. I had Lance as my number 2 quarterback coming out of that. And, for me, the difference was, everything that you said is true about, small college, all those things. But to me, it's like, what more could Lance do, right? There's the saying that you can only beat who's in front of you. You can only play who's in front of you. And not only did Trey do that, but he did it to perfection. 0 interceptions, national championship, the Heisman for Division I AA. Like, he played as perfectly as he could. He didn't choose. I mean, he did choose to go to NDSU, but that was because nobody wanted him coming out of high school. That wasn't his choice. He wanted to go to a big school and prove himself, and he didn't get that opportunity. But he played perfect ball. Like, he couldn't have done it any better. And for me, NDSU, they just do a great job of running a pro style offense. For Shanahan, the fact that he played under center 39% of the time, called his own protections, had a verbose playbook, all those things, right? And it doesn't mean that Fields can't do those things. It sucks because it feels like when you're trying to prop up one of these guys, you're talking bad about the other. And that's not necessarily the case. It seems like you actually like Lance. I like Fields, but we're going to roll with our guy, and we should. So it'll be fun, though. To me, if these two guys can really reach their peak potential, I think, in 4 or 5 years, we can see like a Mahomes and Allen situation playing out in the NFC year after year. And I think you and I might be doing these shows often and possibly come playoff time if both these guys live up to their expectations. And that right there is a lot of fun to think about.
I agree with you. I think that, the potential's there for both of them. I think that this draft was the best quarterback draft. Or 2021 was the best quarterback draft.
So good.
Besides 2018, or what was it, 2017? Mitchell Trubisky's first year.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that did not go in the Bears fans' favor. I fully admit that. I love Mitchell Trubisky. I think he's a good guy. He was a great Chicago community guy and was just put in a rough situation. But Lance, and again, no denial of talent. I think that it's a great story for him that he worked so hard and proved so many people wrong. And, you see those flashes. I mean, I remember watching some highlight clips from last year of him, going in later in the season and just dropping deep dimes to his wide receivers. He looks good. I just, Justin Fields, yeah, I've followed Ohio State football for a long time, and it's just, he was so good in college. Bad situation last year with Nagy, but preseason he's looked good so far. So gonna stick with our guys, but I'm excited for Sunday. There's no denial about that.
Absolutely. Jamal says, keep that number 7 picture and keep showing it off. Yeah, right here. Sign Kaepernick. Listen, people love Jimmy around here. He's the best quarterback that we've had since early 2000s, in my opinion. Extremely dynamic. And, I think Trey can be every bit that and better. So it's going to be exciting for sure. All right. Let's get into this matchup. This is what we're all here for. It was nice learning about the Bears, Nick, but it's time to talk about the 49ers versus the Bears. We're just 4 days away from this matchup, man. Tell me the one matchup on the football field that you are the most confident in as a Bears fan and how they match up with the San Francisco 49ers.
That one's tough. I mean, don't get me wrong. I saw the George Kittle information today that apparently is he injured or did he come off injury? I don't know. I saw something.
You're talking about Kittle?
Yeah, George Kittle.
Yeah, he tweaked his groin Monday. And I say tweak because we don't know how serious it is. They expected him to practice today, and he was unable to do so. He's very questionable going into this game, for sure. He is.
So that was going to be my original matchup, was going to be Roquan against him. Because Roquan, we were kind of talking about it earlier with the contract situation. He's betting on himself. And why not go after arguably the best tight end in the NFL? I know some people might go, oh, Kelsey's a little bit better. But it's two Titans going against each other.
For sure.
So that was, if he does play, that's my matchup. But I'm going to go with, a matchup that's more so likely that's going to happen is I got to go Debo against Jalen Johnson. I think that Jalen Johnson is going to be, especially now entering, the Allen Williams, Matt Eberflus defense, because the Indianapolis Colts were the number 2 secondary defense in the NFL last year, takeaways wise.
Did a great job against San Francisco last year. So we should point that out. Yeah.
Right. So, you stole the words right out of my mouth, is that they did no, I love it because they did really well against San Francisco. And there's no doubt that Eberflus has had it circled on his calendar. Like, hey, we did what we did against them last time. It worked, but they're going to be prepared for that. We need to make small tweaks. Jalen Johnson, a guy who has a chip on his shoulder, kind of like Lance, second round pick out of Utah, has done a great job so far, in my opinion, in the NFL, dealing with 2 different defensive coordinators, still putting up strong stats, going up against guys like Devontae Adams and Justin Jefferson. And, Devontae Adams tore them up. He tore them up one time last year, but the other time he held his own. And I think that Debo against Jalen Johnson is going to be a huge matchup because they're not going to put Kyler Gordon on him because Kyler Gordon's obviously a rookie. And I think that, Jalen Johnson, he's going to want his money soon too. He's on a 4-year rookie contract entering year 3. And he's got great press coverage. Debo, Jalen Johnson's a bigger corner. Debo's a bigger guy. I think that that's going to be the most confident matchup. I think a lot of people are going to be like, oh man, like either Debo, it's a boom or bust situation for both guys. And it's 50-50 down the middle, but I'm super confident that that's going to be a fun matchup for both sides of the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an interesting matchup for sure. If Kittle's out, I'll tell you this, as a Bears fan, I'm most confident in whoever's going against the right tackle. And you had a guy last year in Quinn who, how many sacks did he have last year? 18, something like that?
18 and a half, broke the franchise record.
All right. So there you go. And we just got done talking early on in this show about how fantastic the Bears defense has been throughout history. And he set the franchise record. I hate that matchup for the 49ers. And without Kittle there to help, if that is the case, I do not like that whatsoever. So I think that for me is probably the matchup that I'm like, if I'm a Bears fan, I'm very confident in. I will say this from the 49ers side of things, the matchup I'm most confident in is 100% our defensive line versus your offensive line. It just
There's no denial of that.
it has to be that, right? Because you've got Bosa, who basically has already said he's coming out and getting 20 sacks this year. Like, he's put that on himself. And what a better way to start than against a young, developing offensive line, right? And so for me, the defensive line should wreak havoc in this game. That is the great equalizer. And so I think that is the matchup that I, as a 49er fan, certainly am the most confident in.
Can I rebuttal real quick?
No, please. Yes. Give me that. Yeah.
So I will get, hats off to you guys that your guys' defensive line is insane. I mean, Nick Bosa alone. But you got to remember last year, Nick Bosa against the Chicago Bears was going against then at the time rookie Larry Borum. Mm-hmm. And Larry Borum went against Watt. Larry Borum went against Aaron Donald. And it's funny, I had Larry Borum's mom on the show a couple weeks ago, and she said these were her most proud moments of her son. And Larry, as a rookie, a 5th-round rookie on top of it, and ironically, our starting left tackle is a 5th-round rookie this year going against Bosa. I think that, Borum held his own pretty well. Braxton Jones, our starting left tackle, has shown huge flashes of success so far in the preseason. And it's preseason, totally understand that. But a guy that no one really knew entering this season, when people on ESPN are talking about him, how good he's doing as a left tackle, that gives Bears fans a lot of hope. And I think that the Bears offensive line this year, we brought in Lucas Patrick, our center, who was the 3rd best run blocking center in the NFL last year for the Green Bay Packers. Mm-hmm. You moved Tevin Jenkins to right guard, who he's much more dominant at, and he plays better. He had a good evaluation because good coaches came in and evaluated him. And, you move Borum to right tackle where he's in a lot better position. And then you have Cody Whitehair, who was a top 5 guard, respectfully, over the last, since 2016 when he joined the league. From his stats, he might not be a big Pro Bowl guy. He's been to 1 Pro Bowl, but he's a much better lineman than a lot of people think. The Bears line is better than last year. Is Justin Fields still going to run for his life? I saw someone comment that. Hell yeah, he is, because you're going against Nick Bosa in the San Francisco 49ers defensive line. But it's not going to be like the Cleveland Browns game where Justin Fields was sacked, 8 times by the end of the 3rd quarter. So I think it's going to be a fun matchup. And I know you guys are confident about that. You could say the same thing about Debo going against, Jalen Johnson. I think it's just going to be fun matchups across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the one thing with Bosa last year is the double team rate was insane, right? Yeah. And somehow he went all season without getting a holding call penalty in his favor. I don't know how that happens when you're that dominant, but the 49ers have really done a good job of beefing up that defensive line. It was already very good, and they've just added more and more pieces. They can do a lot of things. And one thing they really started to develop later in the year is they started moving Bosa around a lot. They'd move him inside, they'd move him to the left, they'd move him to the right. And so they're going to try to find that matchup that they feel like they can expose. And I think that's why Bosa most likely this season reaches that 20 sack total, because they're going to always figure it out. Where's your weakness? All right, we're going to attack that. So I think the Bears offensive line may not be the best. There are some names there. I know Whitehair got, I believe, a captain name today. So sure good did. Player there for sure. I think also when you have a mobile quarterback, and you're starting to see that already in the preseason, they're going to get the launch point changed for Justin Fields. They're going to move him out of the pocket, change that launch point, and really help out that offensive line. And much like the 49ers, as long as they can establish a run game and be a good run blocking offensive line, then the rest can kind of take care of itself, because you can get play action, you can get mobile. There's just so many things you can do. So I like what you're saying there. And maybe they are better than what we're giving them credit for. I just think week 1 that's tough. It's definitely tough.
It's tough, man.
All right, let's go on to the matchup that you are least confident in that your Bears are going to do well in. So maybe it is that offensive line. Maybe it's the matchup we just talked about, or maybe you've got something completely different that you're just not excited about when it comes to the Bears matching up well against the 49ers.
What makes me super nervous is all of our wide receivers. Darnell Mooney I think
Bless
he's
Mooney.
very underrated. There's no doubt about that. But if you look at the rest of our group, Velus Jones Jr. did not practice today due to a hamstring injury,
Oh,
which kind of makes me nervous. He is also our number one punt return specialist. But
yeah.
St. Brown is wide receiver too, because Byron Pringle, who was wide receiver 4 in Kansas City, who did very well. There's no doubt about anyone's going to do well with Patrick Mahomes as their quarterback. But, our entire wide receivers group, Justin Fields handpicked himself. But did he have a large selection to handpick? Not too much. He only had so much to work with, only drafting one wide receiver. You bring in a bunch of different guys. N'Keal Harry is out till at least week 4. But, that is where I'm most nervous, because if the Bears offensive line, so it's kind of like a domino effect. If the Bears offensive line isn't good, Justin Fields is going to be running for his life. He's not going to have good wide receivers to throw to. I think it's a talented group, a lot of potential group, high ceiling group, but they're not there yet. Kind of like what we were saying. They're still developing. So if Justin Fields is running for his life because the offensive line is breaking apart, who's he going to be able to throw to on the run confidently that he's going to be able to go and get the ball? If he can't do that, then they're going to have to rely on the run game. Well, your run game's not going to work if your offensive line isn't blocking for you. So, a lot of people say it all starts with the offensive line breaking down. And as a Bears fan, because of knowing that, I wish that I had a wide receiver like Debo or Devontae Adams that you can just throw it up to and they're going to get it every single time, because then the secondary has to worry about the passing game. Then you open up the running game. Even if you don't have that much blocking, you can do a fullback formation. You can do a trick, play action, something like that. But that's what makes me the least confident as a Bears fan. I'm very confident about our defense, so I can't say anything about that. It's just Chicago Bears defense. But I don't know, man. You can't just rely on Darnell Mooney every single play, especially a guy that's barely 6 foot. I'm a big fan of, big body wide receivers, and, he's a small, but he's a fast guy. I love Darnell Mooney. I'm not saying anything poor about him, but that's what makes me most nervous.
Yeah, no, that's totally understandable. Mooney's a guy that I targeted in all my fantasy leagues, and I did get him in a couple, and I was very excited about it. Wide receiver 3, I'll take that for sure, because I think he's going to have a pretty damn good year. I'll say this. The matchup I'm least confident in as a 49er fan is technically in that receiving core, but it comes from the tight end position, and that's Cole Kmet. So
Yep.
Jimmy Ward is not playing in this game, and Jimmy Ward he shuts down all tight ends. I mean, nobody gets anything on Jimmy Ward. He shuts them down repeatedly. Best tight ends in the league every single time. He's out for 4 weeks minimum. And so Cole Kmet, he's a safety blanket. He really is. I know he's, maybe had some questionable things with some drops in the past, but that guy has oven mitts for hands. I mean, they are huge. I don't know how he ever drops the ball, but I think he's a pretty damn good player. I think Justin Fields is going to rely on him very heavily. And I think that our linebacking core might be preoccupied with the running backs coming out of the backfield, which means Kmet's going to get some favorable matchups in this game. And I think that's where the Bears can really kind of grind it out, get downfield, pick up some third downs, because Kmet can be that guy. And he's massive too. Like, good luck getting in front of, if he boxes you out, it's over. Like, he's just so big. So Cole Kmet's the one that I'm looking out for. I think that could be a nightmare matchup for the 49ers for sure.
And Cole Kmet, I took him on my fantasy team because, I think he's a sleeper. And a lot of people don't know this because they always look at the touchdown stat. He had 0 touchdowns last year. But as a tight end in Matt Nagy's not tight end friendly offense, he had over 600 receiving yards.
Right.
So I agree with you. He's a local Chicago kid. He actually grew up a couple towns over from where I'm originally from. So, I've seen him, and like you said, he is a big dude. And, if earlier when we were talking about confidence, he was my confidence on the offense. Like, he is definitely a safety blanket. But the Niners Debo is, I was saying it earlier too, regarding wide receivers. He's your safety blanket because he can do it all. He's a great utility guy. So I think it's a great matchup. There's no doubt about it. you get scared in every situation. And again, like you said, it's week 1. So
Anything can happen.
anything could happen.
Chris tapping in and says, also, D'Amico Ryans isn't afraid to rush some linebackers. Going to be a long day for the O-line. Great equalizer is Fields' mobility. I agree with that. A mobile quarterback can always be a great equalizer for sure. Here's some Bears love. This is a Bears guy. He's been in all of our chats for the last week. He says, Bosa Nosa, we're going to slam his big nose in the dirt. Okay. All right. I hope this doesn't make it back to him for bulletin board material, my man.
Oh man, I love it. I needed some love in the chat. I've been kind of multitasking, looking at it. I'm like, oh man.
Nah, they've done a good job of taking it easy on you. Now, Ghost of Judah, he's been on some channels talking a lot of mess. They're not going to take it easy on him. Here's what I will say. Nick's been very gracious. We're about to get into our score predictions here, but he's been very gracious coming on the channel, and just go give him a follow as well. The link is in the description. I know you guys are 49er fans, but we got to show him love. I'm sure you're going to want to hear his analysis after the game. He'll give that to you. And he's been very respectful. And, I know he's been respectful, but maybe you want to go talk a little trash. I'm sure he'll take the sub. If you want to talk trash, go ahead. So go ahead and do that. Show him some love. Link is down in the description. All right. Final topic. Bottom line, score prediction. How does this game get won? Who wins this game? And what is the final score in your eyes, Nick?
I think it's going to be a defensive game from both sides of the ball. I think that, this Bears defense, they're young, they're hungry. They're going to want to go after a young quarterback, but the Niners are going to do the same exact thing. And I am the Mike Ditka of ESPN. I always say the Bears no matter what. So I got the Bears winning this game at home, week 1, new regime, new coach. But I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think that honestly, this game is going to be 13-10 Bears. It's going to be a field goal in the last 5 seconds. Cairo Santos is going to hit it in the north end zone to end the game, 13-10 Chicago Bears.
Listen, I love the description too. That's good. If this plays out, I'm going to think you're from the future. I'm just going to throw that out there. Just remember that. Now, there is a question for you here, Nick. Matthew says, Nick, can you indulge me? I drafted Fields as QB2, but didn't watch him much last year. What matchups are favorable this season, and what would you deem success for Fields this season? I think that's a great question, not only from fantasy, but just overall. Like, when you look at Justin Fields, what would be a successful season for you?
From Justin Fields' standpoint, breaking 3,000 yards passing. That's number one for him.
Yep.
I don't see him going out and throwing more than 4,000. And I fully admit that. I've said so on Just Another Year's Instagram. I put discussion post, and one of my discussion posts was, what's his stats going to be? And I wrote, I got Fields with 24 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 600 rushing yards, and 3,800 passing yards. So I think he's going to take a good leap. He's not going to that elite Pro Bowl, MVP status, but I think he's going to have a solid year. And again, the Bears have the 3rd easiest schedule in the NFL this year.
Yeah.
You're going against, this, like you were kind of saying, is that the 49ers secondary isn't as strong. So could be potentially a good matchup. But, Minnesota, we played twice this year. Their secondary is not what it used to be. No. Harrison Smith is not 28 years old anymore. He is getting older. The Lions are a young team. The Bears probably still have one more year of guaranteeing 2 wins out of the Lions, which it's funny. I was watching Hard Knocks right before I came on. So, that's 4 games where Fields is going to have success. And then, there's more in there. The Houston Texans, I think that Fields is going to have success against. But success to him is that Luke Getsy, like he does with Aaron Rodgers, is a lot of rollout plays. And if the field is wide open with that 4.4440 dash speed, Fields is going to rip it up. So if you're in a strong fantasy league that's very run point friendly, I would highly suggest doing Justin Fields, doing that homework, especially against your defensive rankings, because he's going to run like crazy. And like we were saying, is that the offensive line might force him to run a lot more. But Justin Fields, if you saw him in the preseason, he had a lot of success running the ball. Every time I saw a highlight, in every game, he had at least 2 rushing first downs. So I think that's success for him. He's not going to be, Justin Herbert, he's not going to be, Aaron Rodgers, but he is going to be a successful quarterback this year in my eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because we point as 49er fans, we point to Russell Wilson's second season, right? And how just the leap that he took throughout the years. I see Fields being very similar, right? I mean, you're talking about a mobile guy who's very elusive, can get out of very hairy situations. And, as far as fantasy goes, anytime you're mobile, there's value in that. And I'm in a 2 quarterback league. I'll say this. I had a choice to make. I almost took Fields over Dak. Like, I think Fields can be that good
Wow.
in fantasy. And I was so close. Last second, I was like, just go with the proven player, go with what works. But I was very close. So if you've got Fields as a fantasy quarterback, I think you'll be okay for sure. Toby says, calling my shot, Jesse. By the 5th play of the game, Trey will take a deep shot to Danny Gray for a touchdown. I'm not necessarily against them going deep early. I think that we may definitely see that. I just don't know if Danny Gray will be the guy. I don't know if he'll be on the field for that. We'll see, but I like it. You're also from the future if you get that right. All right. So I'm going to give my score prediction. Similar to you, I think that this is actually a closer game than what a lot of people think. I think the rain can be an equalizer, and it does sound like it's going to rain a bit. So with that being said, you're talking about 2 teams that want to play defense and run the ball, right? And so to me, I think the 49ers end up winning this thing 24-13, but it's a lot closer game than that. I think it's around like a 17-13 score with about 10 minutes left in the 4th. And then finally the 49ers kind of put the nail in the proverbial coffin here and end it by scoring a touchdown and going up, the 11 points. But I think that the game is close. I think it's hard fought. And I think that as a Bears fan, even if you lose the game, that it's one of those games that you look at and go, okay, maybe my 10-7 really can live up here. We just lost to a team that was in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, was in the NFC Championship last year and lost to the eventual Super Bowl champs. Maybe we have something here. Like we almost beat them last year. We almost beat them this year. We're right there. So I think it's one of those games, and it is going to be closer than what a lot of 49er fans think. Maybe I'm wrong. A lot of people are picking major blowouts, and I just personally don't see that, not in week 1 especially.
Well, I appreciate that, because when I see the blowouts across the board, I'm like, oh, man. But, I think I'm with you, man. I think it's going to be a good first game. And coming from a Bears fan, if the Bears do somehow, I just have to put that in there, somehow lose on Sunday, I think it's going to come down to the wire at the end. It's going to be a last second, deflating play that's just like, and we're used to it. But we're moving in the right direction. So I agree with you there.
That's awesome. Nick, thank you so much for joining me. Guys, like I said, link is in the description. Go show him some love or hate. Either way, subscribe to his channel. Also, I will say this, link pinned to the top of the chat. Tomorrow night, opening night, we're going to be doing some playback. So we're going to be watching the game live. You'll be able to watch the game live with us. It'll be there on the screen, and we will be on the screen. It'll be just like this with the game in the background. So make sure that you hit in that link. Go show some love there. Show up tomorrow. Watch the game. It's not the 49ers, but it is a division rival. And then Sunday, we are doing the same thing for the 49er game. So make sure you tap in there over at Playback. Guys, thank you so much. Appreciate y'all. Thank you so much for the love in the chat. And until next time, peace.